On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Ishmael Samuel. He's the co-founder and CTO of Paragon. We're going to be talking about, onboarding in general, but actually the impact of adding a new hire, especially a high growth startup. You're going to be adding a lot of people, and how your day gets affected. How much time do you spend? How little time do you spend training and workarounds and lessons learned? And then hopefully, if we get to it, I'd like to ask Ishmael about the hiring of managers, because that's a whole different process and impact altogether. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Amir. I listen to your podcast. I'm a big fan. I'm definitely honored to get the chance to be on here and share some of the things I'm learning myself.
Awesome, man. Now, thank you for being a part of it. I appreciate that very much. I guess two things we'd like to start off with. One is to know what Paragon does. And then I know you're the co-founder and CTO, but that could mean a lot of different things. Just for context, give us a high level of both before we dive in.
Yeah, Paragon is an embedded integration platform for software companies. So our customers are B2B SaaS companies, and they want to connect to their customers' data within their product. So maybe they want to sync their customers, Salesforce records, or send messages to their customers Slack, interact with some third-party project management tool like Jira or Asana or whatever it may be, and that integration is part of their product experience. And so we offer a tool where our customers can connect to Paragon once, much like Plaid, and we offer integrations for this huge catalog. And once they connect with us, they get access to our entire catalog. From there, they can build visual workflows and have access to tooling for interacting with integrations, and get visibility, monitoring, and other tools to see the data flowing in and out of their system.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, sounds like an awesome product, and growth comes with that, adding new people to the team. And I guess just to touch on before we dive in, you're the co-founder, CTO. I know in a startup you wear multiple hats. How much of your time is spent as CTO? How much time is spent doing other stuff?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I wear a lot of hats, and it changes from day to day. I used to say my job was firefighting, and so it's just given any day what is the highest priority thing that I could be working on from engineering. But over time, it's become a lot more managing and empowering engineers, growing the team, unblocking people, helping with architecture. Assigning tasks, making sure people have what they need to do their best work. And so now I joke that I'm a butler.
I love that. Well, I guess servant leadership is big. So you are in line with other great leaders. Let's talk about, your day, and let's talk about, when you hire people. Because, honestly, high growth teams, companies that are scaling, startups that are growing fast. I mean, they could be a third to half spent in the recruiting, talent acquisition, interview world. But it doesn't stop there. You actually make the offer, you bring somebody on board, and then they need to be onboarded, which obviously you take care of. And I think in a sense, we are talking a little bit about onboarding. But I think it's the next step after that in terms of the episode. It's about your day. I'm assuming another engineering leader probably goes through similar things. When you do hire somebody new, right, and you have to help this person get assimilated, mentor. Before all that goes in, how do you start blocking off in your mind your time to make sure that they're supported correctly?
Yeah. So I think when an engineer comes into, and I'm going to focus all my answers within an engineering organization. When an engineer comes in, they're going to have a lot of questions. They want to know where the code is, what does what data stores there are, how they can access those data stores, if there's any admin dashboards, docs, things like that. And you'll find early on that you're answering a lot of the same questions over and over and over again. When I found that the best thing that you can do is actually prepare a ton of documentation, tons of tools, and just hand them over to the engineer and have them just kind of play around for a day or two. And so Usually when an engineer comes in, they have enough things that they need to investigate and to do items that will take them through the application, understand where various things are before they can come and be assigned issues. Depending on the complexity of the application or the areas that they're working on, you can assign them tasks right away. I think there's a lot of work that really goes into preparing. This is like before even you make the hire, to make sure that when they start, they're working on the right thing. So some of those things are, as issues are being filed, we'll label them like, hey, this is a good first issue. We'll label it with the area that it's in, like, hey, maybe this is DevOps related, maybe this is front end, maybe this is a copy change, maybe this has to deal with like an API. And so depending on what an engineer's focus is, we can search by good first issue as well as other labels for the area they're going to be focused in. Then I'm realizing more and more as our product gets more complex, that it's important for them to have a holistic view of what everything goes on. And so now we're having them do a lot of non-engineering tasks first. So using the product as a customer, right? Creating an account, adding team members, which would be themselves, creating projects, creating workflows, things that an end user might do so they understand the use case. And when they're working on their issues, they can do their own quality assurance before someone else code reviews or tests it.
I think some of the legwork you're mentioning seems great. Have them gain a holistic view by using the product as a customer. You mentioned finding a good first issue. Is it the case where you potentially, as you bring in, different people, are you able to reuse some of this stuff? Hey, this is a good starting point. We know for, let's say, mid-level engineers, we'll reuse it. Or is it a case where every hire, because there's obviously a nuance, a skill, capabilities, everything, you're going to have to kind of adjust that every single time?
Yeah, so we're trying something new. Previously, we would just file issues, right? And we use a priority system. So P0 through P3, where P0 is like, this is on fire, this is the most important thing, stop everything that we're doing. And P3, don't tell our product managers, but it's never going to get finished. I'm never going to send it to anyone. And so the P3s are usually like copy changes, or something's off by like a pixel or like a missing border or something. And it's not a good use of our time where we're at today as a company. There's a lot that goes into a pull request that's not even necessarily directly related to the work. So for example, every pull request has to have at least one additional test. The code coverage has to be increased, and this has helped us trend to slowly towards 100% code coverage over the last few years. We can't do, we don't allow simple, git commit for a change. There's like a kind of a intake form on every commit that has to point to like a Jira ticket and all the stuff. It's a conventional change log. And other things that are involved between the labels on the pull request and the assignees, and just really understanding the process. And if an engineer also has to figure out how this large system works, right, while trying to figure out all the stuff, it can be overwhelming. And so we try and have the initial issues be very, very simple so that they can just understand what some of the procedural things that they have to do include. And so we used to have them work on just the same, but rather a very, very simple, good first issue task, which while they're getting ramped up, that's still a good use of their time. But we found as our application, gets more and more complex, we have a number of microservices, all these SDKs, different data stores, all these caches, all the stuff. And when engineers are programming currently, they have to load everything up on their machines. And so instead of having them try and go through and figure out where everything's located, we found something that we're experimenting with is not even having them directly jump into the repo, but having them go through some training where it's a separate repo altogether with the same tools, libraries, frameworks, languages, etc. And they would go through the same tasks that other engineers would go through, that would show them how we write tests, what our conventions are, how to use the administrative tools, and the system that they're working on is much, much, much simpler. And so it helps ramp them up to our conventions and tools before working on something more complex.
Interesting. And I guess like as you guys have added that learning, you realize obviously, don't go into the main repo and try to, root your way around and figure things out. Go into a simpler repo. What do they, I guess, are they just spending time assimilating, understanding what's there? Are there tasks or is there exercises that help them kind of understand then some of the code underlying and whatnot?
Yeah. So we use a number of very opinionated frameworks and tools. I personally believe in convention over configuration. I believe when there's established conventions, it leads to maintainability, and it's easier to work on very large systems because the same conventions are used across the application. And so learning those conventions is completely separate from learning the language. Someone can come in and know, say, Node.js or TypeScript, but the framework that they're using has its own specific ways of doing things. And so when there's a separate repo that uses one of these frameworks, they can focus on learning those conventions and do it in a void of a very simple use case, and not be worried about having to dive into all the dependencies and how things work together, how they got to that state, the commit history, and which all of this can lead them to being very easily distracted. So that's the reasoning behind doing that.
Absolutely. I guess this is some self-directed exercise. There's a framework. There's parameters. I could definitely see that when it comes to actual face time with an engineering leader. In this case, you're the CTO. Your time. How does that work? Like, how do you determine how much time you should spend with somebody? Obviously, you have other priorities, but main priority is to get somebody ramped up and be productive. How do you go about figuring that out?
Yeah. This is something that we are currently figuring out. To be honest, there are a number of teams that are already established. Our core value prop is integrations, and so our integrations team, there's a number of engineers on there, and they can assist each other. They regularly take meetings. They help get their local setups. And usually, when an engineer comes on for this team, they will almost never interact with me, minus some one-on-ones, which I think are important. I'll touch on that separately. But if the best case scenario is there is an existing team that they can jump in on, where they have mentors, and when they have questions, they can post things and interact with those team members to help them pair program or whatever it may be. For some more senior positions where things haven't exactly been established, and we're bringing someone in to define new processes and tools and systems that haven't been created before. It's at our current stage, these teams are usually teams of one or two, and so this person may be the only person they may talk to is myself, or at most maybe one other engineer, to understand how a system got to that state and some of the design decisions. Fortunately, there's a lot of documentation and things both inline within the code and externally on Confluence and Notion and other documentation team tools. But for those will usually be a little bit more hands-on and ad hoc. And the goal is to eventually get these teams to a place where new engineers can come in and have mentorship. One important thing to note is if someone's coming in and there's not an existing team, it's important to hire senior engineers because they can pave the way and they need a lot less guidance. They can look at a system and hold all these different ideas in their head, understand how something came to be, understand design decisions, poke around with themselves. And then as they understand the conventions, they can build on top of them in a void while interacting in a minimal sense. If you bring on two junior engineers in areas that don't have team members working on, then you as the manager are going to end up holding their hand, and it's going to detract from your time in other areas that need you.
Absolutely. And I guess when you mentioned, you obviously the more well-formed teams, you can incorporate non-senior people. There's a structure to help them ramp up smaller teams. Senior hires, maybe they're more independent. And I guess when it comes to your time, initially one-on-ones, what do you talk what do you talk to them about? What is kind of some of those conversations when you're involved in some of those one-on-ones?
Yeah. I have a document that I've created, that I've iterated on over the years. It started with just one or two questions, like how's your week? But over the years, it's slowly developed. And one thing that I found from a previous mentor who recommended this to me, is that the most important question you can ask is, what's your biggest blocker, right? What's holding you back from doing your best work? And so each week when we're talking to new engineers, as well as engineers who've been on the team, I'm giving them the space and the opportunity to tell you, hey, this is what's holding me back. Here's where I spent most of my time this week. That in itself has probably been the biggest area in terms of us as like managers, not just myself, but like my co-founder, chief of staff, etc. Being able to provide the resources that engineers need. It helps guide decisions in terms of where we should allocate engineering. There's work that has to go in product, but if there's a lack of tooling, or maybe the tools that we use get in the way of development, then there's a strong argument why we should be investing time refactoring these things so that our throughput and output goes up. Additionally, during this time, I'll ask them for feedback on team members, people around them. Usually this is it's filled with praise, and so I can go to those other team members and find who has been helping new team members quite a bit. I've been able to identify managers and leaders through this by the praise that people have given during these one-on-ones. I've also been able to find where other people may need help, because someone can let me know privately in a meeting, like, hey, I think this person's struggling and they may need some help here. We are often working in some other capacity, and we can't see everything going on, especially with work from home or remote culture. And so we really need to rely on our team members to tell us what's going on, and give them the opportunity to do so. During this time, I'll also check in on their mental health, see if there's anything going on at home, anything they want to talk about, and really just take the time to connect with them. I see all of my coworkers as my friends, and during this time, we'll talk about their partners at home, or their parents, or trips that they're going on, and I think that connection is incredibly important. Personally, it's I believe I only want to work with my friends, and otherwise I wouldn't enjoy what I was doing. And I think it's important for me to let them know that we have a real relationship.
Absolutely, 100%. I think when you mental health, being remote, before you used to at least be able to offer, hey, I'll take you to lunch, or let's go get coffee, and whatnot, to help ease somebody into the team and assimilate them. And now it's like, hey, you want to jump on the Zoom? I want to see how you're doing. So obviously you have different levels of people that you hire. You have different structures, different mechanisms, support systems. But obviously, as you hire more people, it requires time from the existing team to be supportive, to provide that structure, but they still have to deliver. They still are involved in a sprint. Like, how much planning does it take to make sure that they have that time carved out, that they can provide the necessary time to the new hire?
Yeah, I think this is different from organization to organization. The mechanism that I've developed is a mix of things. So when we're doing sprint planning, and it's usually me and one other engineer. Eventually, this will be like an engineering manager. As I create the task, I assign sprint points to them, and the points are derived by two properties: variability and estimated engineering hours. And so the estimated engineering hours will be depending on who this is assigned to. I think it should take them this long, right? So if it's a junior engineer, give them more time. If it's a super senior engineer, I'll be like, okay, this should take you like half an hour. Then the variability is low, medium, high. Where if it's a simple thing like a copy change, right, like that thing should take that amount of time. Whereas if it's maybe touches a few microservices, might take a little bit of debugging, could be medium. And then if it's creating new systems and processes that don't exist and all this, then high. So low times 1, medium times 2, high times 3. So if I believe it should take this engineer 1 hour and it's slow, then it's, the sprint points are 1. If I think it's going to take them 3 hours, but it's high, right, I'm going to assign them 9 points. I use this to determine how many hours, right, to assign them per week, where everyone should be working probably about 35, 40 a week. So I will then retract this based off of someone's responsibilities, where, for example, we had an engineer who transitioned into a product manager and he's doing an amazing job. But when he first started, he wanted to try out being a product manager. It was split 50-50. And so I reduced his load to about 15, 20 points a week before eventually wanting that down to 0. There are other engineers who have responsibilities like managing, and I found from the one-on-ones, they spend a lot of time reviewing PRs, they spend a lot of time training new engineers, answering questions, pair programming, things like that. And I will lower their allocation because I know that they're doing a lot of that work. Then over time, I can analyze their output. And so we have some engineers who, every week, they're pushing them. And so a few of them may have, more than, 40, hours assigned. But it takes them much, much less than that. And eventually, as you iterate, you get to a pretty good understanding of what each person can handle and how long each task should take them, as well as what their other duties are.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I guess, you have to make sure you know the team's velocity to be able to, give them an opportunity to properly do the job and still be a support for, somebody you're onboarding. And I think we've kind of talked about a lot of ICs. I was just curious, are you also hiring a lot of managers right now, or is that going to be something you need to start incorporating the process?
Yeah, so we've started bringing on product managers over the last few months. So we've got 2 product managers on the sales side. There's some more managerial positions within engineering. We're about to hire our first engineering manager, and so we have a few candidates that we're looking at now, and I'm very, very excited about that. We tried internally using engineering managers, but I found that that's not for everyone, and people may think that this is where they're the next logical progression of their careers, but that's not the only way to progress your career. If you're an IC, you might become an architect instead, right? Or focus on other types of individual contributor work and not necessarily manage people. And some people they know that they want to manage people. Some haven't managed people, but they think that they want to manage people, and it takes some experimentation. At this stage of our company, we recently closed our Series A, and we're really trying to put fuel on the fire right now and get to the next stage quickly. And so we want to experiment a little bit less at this stage, at least from organizational point of view, and bring on people who have done these things before. So now looking externally to bring on an engineering manager.
Absolutely. I guess when we're talking about, you're onboarding somebody and helping them get up to speed, you mentioned you're bringing, first engineering manager hire on. Any thoughts around how, you're going to help that person ramp up? I mean, obviously you have some history from the ICs, but the EM role is a little bit new. Any adjustments you'll make, or any thoughts on how you'll approach that?
Yeah, I think this role is particularly important. One thing that our engineers regularly tell me on one-on-ones is that they feel, because I'm an engineer and I'm still programming here and there, it makes me a much better manager, because when things take much longer, I can just smile and be like, I understand why that would take that long. Don't worry about it. Right. And if there's something that they can't figure out, I can sit down and pair program with them, which I don't necessarily expect an engineering manager to get in there and program with an engineer, right? But I think they need some technical background and some understanding of like what's going on. Additionally, they need I'd like them to have the same view I have on people, where they're not whipping a horse, but they're instead pulling from the front and seeing everyone as their friends and not just their colleagues. And when you have that view, you understand that everyone's best interest is your own best interest.
I like that. That's actually that's a great way to view it, especially if you're building that type of culture, and you have the engineering manager comes in that can understand that and has the empathy to understand why it's important. I think that's going to take the team a far way.
Totally.
Awesome, man. I was going to ask you, in terms of a question, it could be a question, it could be a whole show topic. What is it that you'd like a future guest to potentially answer? Again, it could be a question, could be a topic you'd like to hear an episode about. What do you think?
I think there's two things I'm particularly interested in. One, I'm making the transition from an IC to a full-time manager, right? And not just a manager, but a manager of managers. And what that looks like when there's two engineers versus 5 versus 10 versus 15 versus et cetera, I found has been completely different along the way. And so I'd love to hear someone talk about that in depth, someone that's been a CTO or engineering leader from pre-seed to maybe IPO, or at least like growth stage, series B, C, D. Then I guess to build on top of that, I have been thinking a lot about the importance of what it means to be a manager, right? And executive coach that I started seeing, he had a really great analogy for me, and he told me, my job is the conductor of the orchestra, right? And what instrument does the conductor play? He or she plays the orchestra, right? Not an individual instrument. And if I were to get in and play like the violin or whatever, I would be doing the orchestra a disservice. So someone coming in who's making these transitions, where do they draw the lines, right? And if they have a passion, like in my case, I still love engineering, right? How do I get that fulfillment? How can I still do those things while not doing a disservice to the orchestra? Then the second thing would be, how do you find and hire great managers? That's I'm really, really interested in that conversation right now.
Those are, I think some of those are great topics. The transition from being an IC to a manager of managers. I had a guest on Clarence Unit 21 couple of episodes ago, and he's kind of gone through the same thing as you. That could be an interesting one. Maybe I need to do a roundtable and get you and a couple people together and talk about that, because I think that's when you see young entrepreneurs tackling these great ideas, they're all of a sudden becoming full-time managers, but like you said, managers of managers. And it's interesting to see how people ramp up and kind of learn that job, because we're never taught the job of being a manager. We're expected to just, fall into it and learn, figure it out as we go, trial by fire. But I think that's a great one. Hopefully someone that has gone through the journey all the way to an IPO could be on and talk about it. I think a lot of people like that. Ishmael, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's a good way of maybe picking your mind on anything you mentioned, or just want to contact you in general?
Yeah, I would say the best way to contact me is probably email. You can find me at hello@ishmaelsamuel.com. That's my personal email. I sometimes fall behind my Paragon email because we have a ton of people doing outbound, trying to get us to spend our Series A money.
There you go.
But my personal email is probably better than my business email. But Instagram, I'm on there every day. Just Ishmael the Destroyer.
Ishmael the Destroyer. We'll make sure we add the show notes. Hey man, you're busy. Thanks for coming on, sharing. I think super great insights. It's kind of real time process, some of it as well. So I appreciate the fact that you shared. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been a pleasure, Amir.
Awesome, man. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until next time, two things. One, if you are someone that can speak to some of the topics that Ishmael mentioned, reach out. I think some of these are great. I think a lot of people can benefit from producing this type of content, get the knowledge out there and share it with everyone. Secondly, if you like the episode, share it. That's really how we've been growing. I keep saying that, but recently I've been pushed into trying to do some more social media. So it might not all be organic, but I appreciate the fact that people share the podcast, and that's really still how I think we grow most meaningfully. That's it for now. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.